think a great life is using your strengths, understanding what it is you were put on this earth to do, okay? Understanding what it is that makes you unique and what allows, and what is the truest expression of who you are. Doing that persistently in the service of something larger than yourself. I worked on a number of political campaigns, and most of them lost. And so my future as a political operative and strategist was looking somewhat dim. And I had the good fortune of being a very fast typist. And as a fast typist, I was called on to write a few things, and it turned out I was reasonably good at that, and then became basically a speechwriter, writing for a few politicians, a cabinet secretary, and then chief speechwriter for Vice President Gore during 95, 96, and 97. One of the reasons that I left politics, and one of the reasons I left writing for other people, is because there was that voice that wasn't being heard. I was doing some amount of writing on my own on the side, but in this very demanding job, that was difficult. And I felt like if I stayed around writing for other people, eventually that voice, that internal voice, would be suffocated. What worries me a little bit about some of the younger folks, say folks in their 20s, is that they've been so indoctrinated in the school system that's focused on right answers and pleasing authority figures that they have, in some ways, not even allowed their intrinsic motivation to blossom. When I talk to college classes, it's always a little bit disturbing because I find that I have this sea of faces looking at me saying, is this going to be on the test? We've got a 9-year-old, a 7-year-old, and a 3-year-old. Right now, they all seem headed for right-brain careers. My 9-year-old daughter wants to be a novelist, my 7-year-old daughter wants to be an art teacher, and my 3-year-old son wants to operate his own digger truck. So, I want my kids, I think I want everybody to find out what it is that they do out of a sense of enjoyment and challenge. Not for the external rewards, okay, forget about that. Do what you do because you like it, because it's fun, because it's interesting, because it's challenging, because it's meaningful. People who are intrinsically motivated, they do just fine. They really do just fine, okay? It's the folks I worry about are the folks who are always chasing these kind of external rewards, external validations. I think over time, they start to wonder what their life is all about, and they have huge regrets.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Thanks so much. Thanks. Well, thank you. Thank you for that very warm welcome. One of the things about my past, which I often don't reveal, is that in a former life I worked as a political speechwriter. And because of that, people sometimes ask me, Dan, what makes a good speech? And I've thought about that question quite a bit over the years. And I've discovered that good speeches in general have 3 key elements. 3 key elements to a good speech: brevity, levity, and repetition. Let me say that again. Brevity, levity, and repetition. So I promise to be reasonably brief. I promise not to be too severe and serious. And I promise you, and I guarantee you, I will honor this promise. I will repeat the important stuff over and over and over and over again until you want to scream. Now, here's what I want to talk about. Sort of divided into 2 halves. The first half, I want to tell you about some broad forces in the economy that are putting a premium on a very different approach to business, a very different approach to life, a very different set of abilities that are necessary to succeed in the 21st century. Then, I want to talk about the 6 particular abilities that matter most and how smart individuals and smart organizations are putting them into practice. And I want to get into this by confessing. I want to tell you about the biggest mistake I ever made, and that's going to launch us into this conversation. The biggest mistake I ever made occurred about 20 years ago, when in a moment of youthful indiscretion, I went to law school. Now, I did not do especially well in law school, to put it mildly. I, in fact, graduated in the part of my law school class that made the top 90% possible. Now, if I can digress here for a moment, it turned out that, happily enough for me, that law school, more than anything else I've done in my life, dramatically, profoundly, I would argue, permanently increased my earning power. Because in law school, I met my wife. Otherwise, it was a total loss.